I'm Dana Holgorsen. When disaster strikes your home or business, tell your insurance provider you prefer the restoration company the Mountaineers call. Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration. Okay, ready to get started for game week here. TCU is always a fun one. I just think if you look at the similarities in the two programs, it builds a lot of interest in this game. Winning as many games as both West Virginia did and TCU did, in their respective conferences prior to the Big 12. Both won a ton of games in Group of Five conferences. We're always in the BCS discussions and all that good stuff. It was interesting that TCU joined the Big East prior to the Big 12. Everybody forgets about that, but that happened for about a month, and then they go into the Big 12, and we follow them a couple months later. So it's just kind of neat playing this game based on the fact that what the past was, and then going into the Big 12 at the same time. And you've seen both programs kind of go through the process of building their teams pretty similar, I think, as far as some early struggles with some big wins, and then building some depth to the point where I think both teams are pretty good football teams at this point. If you look at this year's TCU, obviously, Gary's been there for a long time, 20 years, has won almost 75% of his games. I mean, that's almost unheard of in college football. Who's at a program for 20 years anymore? It just doesn't happen very often. And, who wins 75% of their games? I mean, that hardly doesn't happen anymore either. So a ton of respect for Gary. You guys know that. I've talked him up for the last 6 years that we've played. But this team he's got's a really good football team. I think it starts when you can say that you got around 16 senior starters. I mean, that's impressive. Their depth is very apparent with what their depth chart looks like. That thing used to have about 2 people on it. Now it's got 3 and 4 people at each position. I study the special teams is more than I ever have, and understanding it better than I ever have. And when you got quality second-team guys, quality third-team guys that are screaming down the field making tackles, and your starters don't have to play very much on those units because your second-teamers are pretty good and your third-teamers are pretty good, that means you got a really good football team. And that's what I say on TCU. They've been doing the same thing defensively for 20 years, and it doesn't look any different now than it has back when they were really good a decade ago. That's his stamp on the program and his stamp on college football. Got a lot of guys on his staff that speak the same language that he does, so ton of respect for what they're doing. And you look at and turn on their film defensively, they're playing really well. And they got guys that I've been looking at for over the course of the last 3 years, obviously led by their middle backer, the Howard kid, 32. He started against us 2 years ago when we were at TCU. May have been his first start. I can't remember. He wasn't at that position very long because he was a 6'1", 190-pound guy that was playing middle linebacker. They had just moved him from safety, but 2 years later, he's as good as anybody out there. He's a little bit bigger than he was, and he's all over the place making play after play after play. Their front's always good. They rarely have to outnumber you in the box, which is a different type situation than what we're usually used to. They just do a really good job of coaching their guys up with technique, and them guys playing with high motors and doing a great job getting off blocks as sure tacklers as we're going to see out there. And then their coverages is always, they read routes better than anybody. If they know they're going to know exactly what the positions that they're going to have to be in, and they're rarely out of position. So as good as they've always been defensively, and their stats show that. Offensively, didn't know what to expect, honestly, when I turned the film on, based on what they've done the last couple of years with with Meacham kind of running some things there, didn't know if they would change anything or if they would keep it exactly the same. I know, Sonny Cumbie was a guy I've known for a long time, played quarterback for me at Texas Tech, and has been there with them for the last few years. It hadn't changed much. They got, they got another buddy of mine in Sonny Dykes that's running around there being an analyst, giving some opinions, who was at Cal last few years as the head coach, and you can see a little bit of his imprint on it as well, back from our Texas Tech days, and what they're trying to do at Cal over the last couple of years as well. So a lot of familiarity with what they're doing. Know their quarterback well. He's playing like a fifth-year senior. He's played a lot of ball. There's a lot of similarities between him and quarterback that we got playing right now. He's just a year older. But both had great high school careers, played early at their respective universities, transferred, and finding success where they're at. They're running the ball extremely well. Got about 4 different guys that they can hand it to. Their O-line's big and doing a great job of covering people up. And then I can't tell the difference really in about 10 to 12 of their receivers. They got a bunch of guys that are making plays. None of them have like huge stats because they're playing everybody. They got a lot of depth. They got 10 guys that look the same, and they're all capable of making plays and all capable of doing great things as well, which they have all year. They have. So huge test. Special teams wise, same stuff. Their coverage unit leads the Big 12. They've given up 0 punt return yardage. They're perfect on PAT field goal. Their guy kicks touchbacks, places the ball exactly where he wants to play it. Oh, yeah, and by the way, they got the best return guy in the country. Guy's punt return, Turpin, and then there's 2 other guys that look just like him. But he's considered one of the best in the country. So our coverage units better cover, and we better do a great job of blocking up front if we're going to want to get any returns at all. So huge test for us. Excited about it, deserving of their top 10 ranking. I think they're 8th or whatever. Deserving of game day going there, giving them a whole bunch of publicity. We're excited about getting there and seeing what happens. Questions? That's pretty informative, so there should be 0 questions. And so you guys have a great day, and we better go practice.
Dan, always questions about you. So your run defense, how have you concentrated on trying to improve that this week? Is it just technique, or are there other tweaks in assignment, personnel that you're trying to make?
Well, it ain't scheme, because we've been pretty good against the run here over the last 2 years. So, you didn't see me sweat about it. Like I said, we got to do a better job up front of holding gaps, which we got depth. We need guys to step up and be real dudes. I think McDougal took a step in that right direction. Anxious to see if he can continue to play that way. And we need other guys to step up and play Big 12 football. Holding gaps, getting off blocks, being tacklers. From a second level perspective, which this is kind of 1, being a player, and 2, having confidence in the scheme, which I do, and having confidence in Gibby to call the right stuff and get people around the ball. It needs to look like Al Benton out there. I mean, he's running and making tackles at a very high rate. I'd like 2 more linebackers and 3 more safeties to do the same thing. And when you get your starters back, it probably makes it a little easier.
The history here for beating top 10 teams on the road that predates you is not very good. But you were involved with one in Houston when you beat Oklahoma State. What has to go right to beat a top 10 team on the road? What's the formula?
I think, although I really think they're deserving of their top 10 ranking, no question. I mean, you go into Arkansas and win the way they did, and you go into Stillwater and win the way that they did. Yeah, that's a good football team. It's hard to go anywhere on the road and win in the Big 12. It wasn't exactly easy for us the last time we played. So, you know, I just think you get familiar with your opponent and you practice and you go play. I think our guys understand every bit about that when it comes to Big 12 football. We've went to Fort Worth and won before. They're going to know what the hotel looks like and what the drive to the stadium looks like, and did a great job with their stadium. Their stadium looks great, and their locker room's awesome. And it's not our guys going to understand what that's like, and we're gonna know our opponent pretty well. And then you got to go in there and you got to play. So to me, it's pretty much as simple as that. And there's no, you know, just because TCU is number 8 in the country doesn't make it any more important than going to Kansas. It just doesn't, not from my perspective. And you guys can say I'm full of crap if you want to, but it's no different with how we approach it and how we talk about it and how we practice it and how we expect to go do it.
Right now, with the return of who you may have back along the offensive line, and then Kelby, can you roll in 6, 7, 8 guys to this point? Or are you just comfortable with about 5 to 6?
We've successfully played 6. I need to see more out of other people that you may or may not be talking about. If that, I don't know who else you're talking about. We don't have. I mean, there's a couple of them that are first-year players. I've never had O-line guys that are worth the crap at all as first-year players. So it becomes a concern. It's something that we focus on. We got to get guys. You know, been very happy with Josh Sills and how he's played as a redshirt freshman. That's rare. So, got to keep playing guys and see, you know, happy to have Grant back. He gives us experience. That's for sure. The other guys you're talking about are all first-year players. You know, but since when do first-year players at O-line come in and change things? I don't know what your expectations are in that, but they're certainly different than mine.
And you talked a lot about how coaches' sons, you know, learn things from being players. How about the situation that Ken Hill, whose dad was a Major League Baseball player? You're going to face Shane Buechele, possibly. Dad was a Major League Baseball player. Does that transfer over, I mean, in any way, shape, or form, do you think?
In a different way, I think. I really haven't thought of it that way, but the competitive aspect of it, I think there's probably a lot to talk about. You know, just growing up in a competitive competitive household where, you know, dad rubs the kid's head and goes and competes at the highest level possible, you know, and so I think there's probably a lot of developmental aspects of just the competitive spirit, you know, whether any of that translate into certainly the athleticism, you know, is something to talk about as well. But from when I talk about coaches' kids, I look at Graham Harrell, Case Keenum, Clint Trickett, Will Greer, those type guys, you know, Danny Amendola, those kind of kids that were truly coaches' kids from a football perspective whose dads coached them. And you know, that's a different type of kid, because that kid, when their dad coaches them, grows up in a building like this, and they're just around the, you know, I'll walk in there and see Jake and Logan and Will Greer be sitting there watching film on specific things. It's just an example of those guys growing up and kind of understanding the football aspect of it. You know, when I recruited Graham Harrell, I'd go in there and talk to his dad, Sam, who's one of the most successful high school coaches in Texas at Ennis High School. And this is like freshman or a sophomore, and me and him would be sitting there watching film on practice, and the kid would be there in the corner paying attention, you know. So does that translate the baseball aspect of it? It's hard to say, but the athleticism for sure, and the competitive spirit for sure.
I heard an NFL coach say that it takes about 6 games for them to know what their team is. How many games does it take for you to know how good your team is, or get a feel for what your team is?
You ask everybody, they probably give you a different answer. Did an interview about 20 minutes ago that said that they thought it was 3. And they said, what kind of team you got? And I'm like, I mean, I don't know. It seems like a year and a half ago that we played Virginia Tech at this point. But I'm anxious to get out there and find out. I'm also anxious about 8 straight weeks of the same thing. You know, that eight challenging games moving ahead for us. You know, so we'll probably have a little better idea this weekend. You know, I mean, it may take us 10 games to figure it out. I certainly hope not. I do think this team will keep getting better. You know, I've said it a good bit. we got a lot of older guys, but not a lot of experience. You know, so I think the older guys will continue to get better based on experience. You know, so hopefully we're playing our best football going into week 13. That'd be nice.